Today's story is titled, "The Beasts That Roam a Spent Battlefield Are Best Left Undisturbed," by TheEinfachLiamYT. Check out his YouTube channel as well. The link to the story and YouTube channel is in the description below. Please enjoy. The following text was recently found under the rotten floorboards of a church in eastern Bavaria, Germany. The pages were bound in old leather, plain, without anything on it. We suspect the book to have been written between 1270 and 1340. As it was originally written in German, we have translated it as best we could. Due to some of the text being too smeared or old to read properly, we have summarized what we believed it to say. These parts of the writing are written within brackets to differentiate from the direct translation. We hope you understand. We have been riding for almost a week now. I fear that my horse will not let me mount it again. We have found refuge in an old worn-down building. I myself am not a man of God. Some of my companions, however, are. One of them has been teaching me how to write for a while now, though he begged me not to tell anyone his name due to his fears of being excommunicated. They are praying while I write down what happened to us. We are a company of soldiers for hire, originally some 100 men, now reduced to just about 15. We are all wary and more frightened than men like us should be. 2 days ago, we were camped south of Gamelsdorf. We followed our King Ludwig IV into war against some Austrian royalty under the promise of payment. Scouts had given us intel about the Austrians approaching from the east, letting us set up defenses. Since the time frame we had was unclear, we had only dug small trenches and erected a makeshift blockade on the road when the Austrians found us. I could not tell from where I had been, near one of the blockades, how many there were. The men I was with had been told to hold this road should we be attacked, and to send message to the king's force once we were certain the Austrians were truly going to attack from there. Before our army had even arrived to aid us, the Austrians were already in formation. Their archers were raining arrows on us. They knew how to lead their arrows to us precisely, being close enough to fire in straight lines. Those that believed in God prayed as we hid behind wagons and in trenches, behind our shields and behind anything else we could find. I saw men be pierced by a dozen arrows, dead before they even hit the ground. I cannot recall how many volleys they had let loose, but within a heartbeat, the whistle of their arrows died down and was replaced by screams of 1,000 men and the beating of their horses' hooves on the ground, mixing with the wails of the dying men on the ground. We saw no other choice but to hurriedly form a quick wall of shields. All forms of shield were present: heaters, kites, ovals, and even bucklers. We did what we could, but the different shapes robbed us of a clear formation to get into. A straight wall each of us decided by themselves, unfit to face a charge of cavalry, but better than doing nothing. Relief came in the form of our own riders charging past the bunch of us against their charge. Both attacks broke before our riders even reached them. Within a heartbeat, both groups of horses had intermingled. We began to advance, as did the Austrians upon seeing the disaster of their cavalry. Archers from both sides began to let their arrows loose into the mass of men and horse. The battle lasted a rough hour, perhaps two, but by the end of it, the Austrians began to retreat. We gathered our wounded as well as theirs. Had we found someone of note, we might have been able to ransom them back to their lords, but we had no such luck. Our wounded were cared for. Theirs were questioned for information before we put them out of their misery. A large part of our army began to pull back towards the camp south of Gamelsdorf now, leaving the few hundred of us to, again, hold the road. Our own encampment wasn't much, just a few basic shelters of linen tied between some apple trees, but it was enough to keep the rain or the sun from our heads. We were thankful for every single one. The setting of the sun signaled dinner time, making us set up a dozen campfires with pots or grills above them. The few men we sent out to hunt either returned with empty hands or not at all. Deserters, I thought. What little meat we had brought was put into stews with other foods. By the looks of it, a large part of this paragraph describes the stew in great detail. Carrots, potatoes, and apples, among many other things we couldn't decipher, were part of this day's diet. With a warm feeling in my stomach, I volunteered to keep watch for the first night. 2 men whose names I can't recall joined me. One was taller than myself, with a bear for a beard and deep, sunken eyes. The other was young, with slim fingers and stubble on his chin. The big man wielded a kite shield and a warhammer, while the boy had only his bow, arrows, and a knife he used to eat and prepare new arrows. I myself had a heater shield and a bastard sword. For a while, the night was uneventful, leading to the big man resting his chin on his kite, while the boy walked in circles around a tree to keep himself awake. I myself wasn't feeling all that merry anymore either. The 3 of us were startled when we heard the sound of something moving in the tree line down the road. The corpses within it hadn't been cleared yet, left for the birds and the worms and the rats to fight over. Only their armor and arms we took, mainly to replace what had to be replaced. It sounded like a deer was carefully stalking through the forest, as if it was being watched. That alone wasn't out of the ordinary. What surprised us was the loudness of it. A shape in the wood is described, though all we can make out from the text is that it had horns as well as antlers. Supposedly, it is very large and walks on 4 legs. We aren't sure if we misread or mistranslated. The boy, myself, and the big man exchanged glances of nervousness. With his bow in hand, the boy volunteered to check. If it was just a deer, he claimed, he could shoot it, and me and the big man could then carry it back. If it was the Austrians planning an ambush on us, he would scream. We let him go, though neither of us believed this was the enemy planning an ambush during the night so soon after being beaten. They should lick their wounds first. We agreed after the boy was out of earshot. The air, along with the grass beneath us, was damp. With a torch, the boy made his way towards the trees, careful not to trip on any corpses. A broken leg could be a death sentence. At the edge of the woods, he laid the torch down on the ground, most likely as to not scare away the deer he was after. He carefully treads into the woods, out of view. Now, only the sounds we could silently hear in the distance, and what little light the torch shined into the woods gave away what he was doing. I wish he had left the torch with us or took it with him. It didn't take long for him to find something. We could make out the whistle of his arrow flying through the air. Then, silence. Perhaps he was just stalking something, or making sure his target had found its target, I hoped. He didn't come back. Throughout the entire night, we were waiting. We thought about going into the trees to see what had happened, but something stopped us. The torch was still burning on the wet ground when the sun rose, not a sign of the boy. Weary and tired, the both of us woke up some of the others before heading to sleep. Whether the big man slept, I cannot say, but I barely did. I got back up during midday, when the spot I had chosen to sleep fell prey to the sun's heat. I was informed that King Ludwig had moved on with his army. We were left behind with our payment, a thanks from the king himself. The information that the scouts had seen the Austrians retreating further, and the order to burn the bodies. Burying was not allowed. The king himself apparently drilled into our men. They must be burned. I looked out into the field and saw some of the men with shovels in hand, digging the trenches deeper. They would serve as one long, deep grave. Lazy bastards. I thought that they would rather dig ditches than collect wood for a fire. The battle was definitely over. I knew now, and the Austrians wouldn't be back for at least a few days. By then, we planned to be gone already. I wasn't in charge of the men, but I was on good terms with the man that was. I decided that enough men were digging graves, so I picked up my sword and walked towards the forest. I picked up the burnout torch and walked further. I had no way of knowing where the boy went, I didn't have to search for a long time, however, before I found his bow. Neither the boy nor his arrows were anywhere near it. Near it was, however, a shield, then another, then a short sword, then shin guards made of steel. They were split down the middle like wood, just barely held together. The ground was littered with damage and broken equipment, yet not a single sign of man was left. A sound in the woods behind me made me gasp and turn around, my sword raised in both hands after I dropped the torch. Nothing was there, but the first shield I had seen was suddenly broken, as if someone had slammed down upon it with a hammer. I decided to return to camp. I heard more sounds as I made my way back, but I dared not to look. As I emerged from the woods, I noticed that the edge of the woods was weirdly scarce of corpses. The thought that perhaps the men had begun clearing them from the forest first came to me, but what difference would it make to do so? As I neared the field and began walking past the corpses again, I noticed that the ones further out had their arms, their legs, or their heads torn off, as if something was making its territory, I thought. They were forming a clear line. One needs to only connect the dots to see it. The thoughts that followed, I shall not put to page. From what we could read, he began to help bury the corpses. He told some people about what he had saw and what he thought of it, but he reaps nothing but laughter from the godless and disbelief from those that follow the teachings. As night fell over us again, we prepared more stew and decided to return to where we had come from the next day. Given that most of us were hired on the way here, including myself, we would each depart when we felt like it. It made it easier to travel, as no one would have to share with strangers on the way, and a group of perhaps 10 men wouldn't be noticed as easily as hundreds marching with all their equipment. Curiosity and fear led me to take another night's watch. The big man did as well, seemingly led by the same feelings. Along with the two of us, a bald man in ragged bits of mismatched armor with an axe too big to wield with one hand, and a man about my age with a bright smile and long flowing hair kept watch. The man with the pretty hair had a pike and a round shield. As the night dragged on, I told the 3 men what I had seen. My companion from the previous night believed me without question, though the other 2 were skeptical. We kept chatting for a while, wishing for alcohol or women to warm us, until we got back to my experience. They offered to go into the forest with me at the very moment to check. I was foolish enough to accept. With our weapons and a pair of torches, we went. I was walking in front of the 3, given that I was the only one that brought it up originally. We walked in the shape of a diamond. He describes what they were chatting about and how he hid his fear. Apparently, the 2 newer men joked about finding a pair of whores in the woods for the 4 to share, while he himself and the big man grew more and more fearful. The big man began to show signs of his fear. I must have as well. Within a flash, one of the men disappeared. The one with the pike or the one with the axe, I didn't care to look. Blood stained the back of our heads. The furthest man back in the diamond was now gone. I only heard his weapon drop before the big man asked me whether I'd seen anything, fear clearly visible in his eyes. The other one began to run, panic driving his legs to move without his eyes checking the grounds for hazards. A branch catches his foot. He falls, losing grip of the torch and flinging it into the woods, but he never lands. Something the size of a bear standing on its hind legs snaps past us, ripping his body open and dragging it away, still in the air, with what must have been antlers. I looked to the right, then to the left. I couldn't focus on anything. I lifted my sword in an attempt to bring myself courage, but it was of no use. I have never been this scared in my life, even while writing this. Me and the only man of the group I had left finally found some sense. We stood with our backs together, trembling in the dark. It showed itself to me, finally. It was taller than a man standing, truly. Antlers like branches where they connected to its skull, and a pair of thick, curved horns were visible on its head. How good it was that I held that remaining torch. The flames flickered in its large, wide eyes as it stared at me. I tapped the man at my back, and he turned around to face it too. "Blood," he said with his shaky voice, and I noticed it too. Its head was covered in blood, some of it dried but most of it fresh from our companions. The rest of the man with the long hair hung from its long, thin snout, trapped between teeth as big as knives. His face was open, split down the middle. His hair hung down, swept this way and that way by the wind softly rushing through the trees. It felt like we were staring this thing down for hours. The man by my side said something about God helping us, but I have my doubts that any God would create something this size to feast on the corpses of soldiers after a battle. I began to walk to the side, where its latest meal had attempted to run to, and my companion followed suit. We never took our eyes off the beast. We took 10 steps, and it would take 1 to close the distance again. In the distance, we could see the shimmer of the other torch. It must have landed in a bush and caught it on fire. By now a large flame had sprung from it. By the time we had come to the edge of the tree line, we heard shouting coming from behind us. The men had noticed the fire and our absence. The beast heard them too. Its head snapped upward a bit, looking over us and towards the camp by the road. It shook its head, dropping what it had in its snout and bolting over us. I was lucky, landing in the dirt beneath us on my back, but my companion's head met a rock that broke his fall rudely and cracked his skull open. He was dead, I hoped, but there was no time to check. I ran after the beast, sword in hand and fear in my heart as I watched. I ran as fast as my legs would take me, but this thing was faster than any of us. Any man holding a pike or a spear was slashed open, the reach of their weapons useless against the giant antlers. It often left their guts to spill on the floor and their arms to fall into the piles. Men with swords or axes and shields were treated to its horns instead. Pierced on them, the beast collected men and only stopped to shake them off once its horns had become too heavy to carry. Some of the men, I realized in horror, must have remained alive until the beast shook them off and cut them from the mortal coil. No man could fight this beast, so I bolted towards the few horses we had. Getting myself on a horse was a struggle. They would have been gone had we not tied them to the trees. They didn't like this creature any more than we did. A wound on my leg I had failed to notice until now slowed me somewhat, but I managed to lift myself onto a horse despite the pain. I must have caught it when the beast rushed over me, perhaps by my own blade falling into the dirt beneath my leg. No one thought of even trying to saddle the horses. Whomever can get their legs clamped around the horse rode off. I was lucky, finding a horse that was fast and seemingly in the prime of its life. Those on slow horses, or those that wasted time with something, were slashed apart, horse and rider to be both tossed aside like a bag of meat. The beast chased after us, but it must have been tired already. The speed from before was partially depleted. I could get away, along with a dozen or so others that managed to mount a horse. We rode until the horses threw us off near the ruin we sit in now. Every sound sent shivers down my spine, fearing that it might have tracked our scent. I hope now that it is satisfied with the feast it prepared for itself. I pray with those that are left that no man shall ever attempt to enter those woods again. Was it the battle that brought its wrath upon us, or a persistent presence? Had we left with the king, would we have been spared? These thoughts matter little now, as I don't expect to survive the next night. The wound on my leg is beginning to stink, and none of us know how to, or whether we have the things to treat it nearby. The book ends at this point, The contents will be brought to authorities nearby for safekeeping, proper copying, and studying. I myself don't believe what I've read here was real. However, I can't help but notice that this rune is entirely void of the remains of its writer or the companions he mentioned.